What's going on, everybody? You're listening to the Point2Point NHL Recap Show, Season 3, Episode 42. I'm Pascal Pryor, joined by Mark Haverlack. Today we're going to continue on with our off-season deep dives. We're finally getting to the playoff teams, so today we're going to be doing the playoff teams that lost in Round 1 out in the Western Conference. So we got the LA Kings, the Dallas Stars, the Edmonton Oilers, and the Utah Mammoth. So stay tuned because we're going to be talking about those 4 teams for today. Before we get into all of that, though, Mark, what's going on with you, dude?
Nothing much, man. I feel like the same thing over the last couple episodes. Not really much going on. Watching a lot of Blue Jays. They've actually been kind of picking it up recently. They're right in the playoff hunt right now. So I'm kind of hoping they can go on a little bit of a run here and get into the playoffs. But besides that, just the dog days of summer, man. Not really much going on. Training camp in a couple weeks. So hopefully we maybe get some moves or some
Yeah,
news in the near future here. But besides that, nothing really, dude. How have you been?
I'm with you. It feels like it's still those dog days of summer, but it is getting a little better, right? Like it does seem closer and closer now because we had our first NFL preseason games this past weekend. So it's like the NFL, they're right around the corner. Also for me, like I'm a soccer fan, football fan, right? So the EPL, it's starting up next weekend, and Arsenal had their Community Shield game, which they won on Sunday. So I was watching that, and it feels like it is still kind of those dog days of summer, but we are like kind of at the end of that where all these leagues are starting preseason or about to start up regular season, right? And I was thinking about it last night too. The one thing that I haven't had to deal with in the last couple of years is usually the dog days of summer goes by a bit quicker because I'm usually taking my summer vacation kind of mid to the end of August, right? Where this summer I'm not doing anything, so it's really just like dragging on. And I was thinking about that last night, and I was like, oh man, like it really sucks a lot more than this year compared to last year's. Let's get into the first team, though, we're going to talk about today. It is the LA Kings. This is a team that, of course, lost in the first round of the playoffs last year. They've had a little bit of roster turnover. We'll talk about that after, though. Mark, I want to start off by talking about these prospects because looking at their prospect pool, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I want to know what you think about this prospect pool, though.
Honestly, I actually don't mind their prospect pool for like where they've been drafting recently. I think
Yeah,
that I don't know if you're looking at it more as like maybe top end guys, because I would say they probably don't have a lot of top end guys in their prospect pool, but I think they've definitely made some good draft picks for like where they've been in the draft over the past couple of years. In the first round this year, they took Elton Hermanson, who played for Modo and Allsvenskan last year. He's kind of a pretty deceptive player who can score goals, even though he was playing in like the tier 2 Swedish league this past year. I actually like him quite a bit. I wasn't really sure where he'd go in the draft because there was like hype about him like maybe in the top 15. There were some people that were lower on him in the first round, but I think he's like a goal scoring player that could probably help the Kings out within the next couple of years. And I mean, they do struggle to score goals over the past couple of seasons, I would say. So I would say, especially for where they were at 19th overall, like that was a pretty solid pick overall, excuse me. Looking at some of the other guys in 2025 in the first round, they took Henry Brusevich, who plays for London in the OHL. He's a pretty good player, good skater. He can move the puck, solid two-way. I don't know if he's going to be a top 4 defenseman. I sort of think that he will be, but I think there are still some question marks. But he kind of rose the ranks last year in 2025. I didn't really think
yeah.
he was going to end up being a first round pick, but I would say he definitely got better in his offense last year. In the OHL, was pretty good overall. Some of their other guys, I really wonder about Kenny Connors making the NHL this year. He had a little bit of a cup of coffee in the NHL. They had a couple guys that were called up last year that I really didn't know a lot about, like Jared Wright and Taylor Ward throughout the season. But I really wonder after a strong AHL season if Kenny Connors could get somewhat of a decent look in the NHL this year because he played really well in the AHL last year. Couple other guys we're looking at here. Wojtek Sihar. I don't know if you remember him from the World Juniors with Czechia, but he was a really good player drafted in the second round. Pretty solid season in Kelowna, but he was injured a little bit. Now, the reason why I don't hate this prospect pool too is I really like their goaltending situation for the
Yeah, it is
future.
pretty good
I
there.
will say, like, I'd say maybe Detroit has a little bit more strength in that category. There was another team we talked about recently too, where Columbus, that I think their goaltending was pretty good. But like I would say, at absolute worst, LA has got a top 4 goalie prospect pool in the NHL right now.
Yeah.
Carter George in the has been like the best goalie in the OHL over the past 2.5 years. I think he's going to play in the AHL this year. I actually wouldn't be surprised if he gets a decent shot in the NHL. Probably after this season, maybe he'll get called up here and there. But he's a really solid goalie, very calm and composed, and just a guy that I think could be a starting goalie in the future. Hanton Slakinski, he won. Was it this past year that Western Michigan won the NCAA? Am I wrong about that? No,
I
it was
believe it was
Denver.
2 years
It was
ago.
Denver, yeah. Slakinski won with Western Michigan the year before. He's kind of like Carter George, definitely a little bit different of a playing style, but more like calm, composed. They both aren't necessarily like the biggest guys, but they move really well. They track pucks really well. I like him quite a bit. Petteri Rimpinen, I don't know if you remember him from the World Juniors,
Yeah.
the small Finnish goalie. He was drafted as like an overager last year in the 5th round. He's a battler, dude. He's just a guy who never gives up on pucks ever. He definitely doesn't have the same playing style as George or Slakinski, but I really wonder about him maybe being like a backup goalie in the NHL in the future after maybe a couple more years of time in the AHL. Eric Portillo, their other goalie prospect, he's a little bit older now. I feel like he's got like the least upside out of all these guys, but he is absolutely massive. He's played a lot in the AHL. He's had some really good numbers. I was honestly curious if he'd get a shot this year to be in the NHL, but Forsberg and Kemper still have a year left on their deals. I think Portillo might be the guy that gets called up first here, but they've kind of got a plethora of goalie prospects right now. And like, if 2 of these guys didn't become solid NHLers, like I would be really shocked.
Yeah, for me, looking at this prospect pool, it's as you mentioned, the goaltending prospects that LA has, like it's definitely a lot better than their skating prospects that they have. I want to move on now and talk about their lineup going into the season because this is a team here that has had a massive loss, losing Anze Kopitar, of course, to retirement. Looking at their offseason moves, they didn't really do a whole lot to replace Kopitar. Like they bring in Matt Zuccarello, Eric Gustafson, Eric Holla, of course, Corey Perry's still around there, right? I do really like that Zuccarello signing 1 year, $1 million. Like that's a cheap deal, very low risk. Zuccarello's had a couple good years with the Wild, right? And you can bring him in here, play him within the top 6 on this LA team, maybe even on the third line if you have to shuffle things around. How do you feel about this lineup, though?
Yeah, I think they made like a lot of low risk moves this summer. Like they signed a couple guys to like 1 year deals at $1 million with signing bonuses. And I think it's sort of like the last kick of the can, I would say, for
Yeah,
like some of this core, especially with Drew Doughty heading into the last year of his deal and them even saying publicly that not that they're not going to re-sign him, but they're not really dealing with that right now and they want to see how the season plays out. I would say for the position they're in, like it was probably a decent offseason, but I'm still just not convinced that they're a very good team. Like they were the worst team in the NHL to make the playoffs this past year. I mean, they had the 20th most points in the NHL and they ended up squeezing in with 90 points last year. So like I would say I just really see this team kind of revamping a lot of their players potentially after this offseason. Like you even look at their forward core, it's like, yeah, Kempe signed that 8 year deal. Besides that, like their longest contract is Fiala and Scott Lawton up front at 3 years.
yeah,
So it's like they could have a lot of a different looking forward core after this year. Obviously, on defense, they've got a couple guys that are signed to like medium-ish term with Mikey Anderson, Brant Clark, Cody Ceci still got 3 years left on that deal too. And like we talked about their goalies, they're both going into the last year of their deal. So I think it's more like he wanted them to remain competitive and potentially get back into the playoffs, but they're losing a guy like I wouldn't say that Kopitar was like a number 1 center last year. I still felt like he probably regressed a little bit, especially like point production wise. That made him more of like a second line center, but they didn't replace that in any way, right? Like now Quinton Byfield's stepping up to be that number 1 center. I don't really know if he's going to be able to handle that load, but I think he did an okay job overall. But I still don't love the roster overall, and I don't really know where they're going to be able to score goals.
yeah. I have that same feeling with LA, and I think if LA is going to be making the playoffs next season, like Darcy Kemper is going to need to have a pretty big year in goal for them because, as you mentioned, like there's not a whole lot of goals in this lineup, and I at the end of the day, I kind of just think that if LA's making the playoffs next year, it's going to be that they finish third in the Pacific Division, and it's similar to last season where it's like they got in the playoffs, but like when you look at the overall landscape of the NHL, like they were not a playoff team, right? Like I think that's the only way LA's making the playoffs next season. And even then, like to be honest, like there's other teams in the Pacific Division that I just right now rank ahead of LA, right? Like if you were to ask me, gun in my head, would I take San Jose or LA to make the playoffs next season? I'm kind of leaning towards San Jose just based off what they have over there, right? So it is a tough spot where LA's in, where it's like you went on all these cup runs over the past like decade, right? And you're kind of paying for it now where you don't have an amazing prospect pool. You haven't really had any amazing picks, and a lot of your players now are starting to kind of get older, right? And it's kind of that moving on from this guard of the LA Kings team. Mark, I want to ask you, who is going to lead this team in points next season?
I think with a full season with Panarin, I could definitely see him up there. I really wonder about a full season with him paired with Adrian Kempe. Because the one thing last year that Ken Holland was saying was he felt like they had enough goal scorers, and it was more like guys that could get those goal scorers the puck. Well, Panarin is one of the best at the NHL of doing that and facilitating and being a
Yeah.
playmaker. So I still think that Panarin move is going to benefit them quite a bit. I just don't know if a guy like Kempe would end up getting more points than him. Like, I still think Panarin could probably hit 85 plus points next year, even on a team that's probably not as offensively gifted as like the Rangers at times, but he's still a hell of a player.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of between Panarin and Kempe. I'm going to lean towards Kempe, though. I just think that he's a more versatile player. And the other thing, too, is I could see him maybe potentially at points splitting up Panarin and Kempe, right? Like right now we have the projected first line to be Byfield, Kempe, Panarin, but I could see it where maybe you try to put Kempe down at second line centerman and give him some minutes there, right? Because he is a guy that can play center as well. So it is going to be interesting to see what they do there. But I do think it is going to be Kempe leading the team in points next season. Mark, not a whole lot of young players on this team, but who do you think is going to have a breakout year?
Yeah, I mean, they're two kind of young studs or Byfield or like potential studs or Byfield in Brant Clark. I'll go with Byfield still. Like I think that maybe with more of an opportunity, he could potentially grow into what we thought he would be. I'm not very like optimistic about my answer overall because this team's actually a lot older than I think a lot of people realize, and they don't have a lot of young studs. The other guy I was kind of flirting around a little bit was Alex Laferriere, but
Yeah.
I don't know about his overall ceiling. Like I don't know if he's gonna be like a 60 plus point player in the NHL. I think he's more of like a well-rounded middle six, maybe at times a top six forward. Meanwhile, with Byfield, there's always been that hope that he could develop into like a star. So I would say like a breakout season from Quinton Byfield this year would be about 70 points. And I think it's possible, but I'm not very optimistic about it.
For me, I'm going with Brad Clark. I just look at this decor now, and it's a lot of older guys on this decor, right? Like for previous seasons, Drew Doughty was kind of hurting his growth there a little bit, where Brad Clark isn't going to have this issue this season, right? Like I think he really is going to be this number one defenseman for LA, getting the top power play minutes, and I think he is going to have a big season. I could see him being like a 55 point defenseman here for LA, if not maybe even closer to 60, and really having a big year here for them. Mark, next question for you is looking at their prospect pool, what grade would you give it?
Yeah, I think there was even like a couple more guys that I didn't mention that I think could be like potential NHL players down the road. It's just kind of what you said. Like the upside isn't very high. Like I sort of look at it and I'm like, I think Hermanson could be a top six forward. I think Bruce Savage could probably be a top four defenseman at some point. I just look besides that and I think it's more like kind of plugins for your middle and bottom six,
Yeah.
which could be a good thing too for LA, right? Like they've got a lot of older players right now. If you can get some young guys in there in the next couple of years that could take those roles, it would definitely benefit you. I think I'm going to give it a B minus just because I really like the goalie prospect pool. And I think there's like more than one guy that could potentially like be their guy in the future. And I think that's definitely beneficial to have. But that probably puts them more in the mid pack for the NHL to me than if they didn't have many goalie prospects and it was mostly players. Like I'd probably be looking at more like a C minus.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna give them a C plus. I agree with everything you said there. For me, I just look at I love their goalie prospects, but I just look at the forward prospects that they have, and then considering where this LA team is right now, it doesn't make me feel too safe about their future, right? It's like they could potentially, as you mentioned earlier, they could potentially have a very different looking team within the next couple of years. And it's like when you look at this prospect pool, it's like how many guys in this prospect pool could really be making an impact there in the NHL? You mentioned Bruce could potentially be a top four defenseman. Like that's one, and then their first round pick from this year, like that's another. But even those, it's like those are still question marks, right? Like it's not like these guys are both no doubt top pairing and top six forwards, right? So I'm gonna give him a C plus. Last question for you, Mark, is looking at their overall offseason, what grade would you give them?
This is like a tough one because, like I said, like I think they didn't make any like stupid moves, kind of like they did last year with the Dumoulin and the CC contracts.
Yeah.
But their team like isn't a whole lot better. It's even debatably worse. And I think for them, it's like they're trying to make the playoffs and they would love to win a Stanley Cup if they did, or if they could, sorry. Um I'm gonna go C. I'm looking at it more in the sense of like they should try it. They either should have tried to like blow it up or they should try to be competitive. And I just think losing Kopitar, there's absolutely no replacement for that whatsoever on this roster. I
Yeah.
think Alex Laferriere is a guy that usually isn't a center, played center at points last year, and I think he's going to be forced to be their second line center right now. And I don't necessarily love that. So I'm going to give them a C.
Yeah, I'm going with you. I'm giving them a C. I look at this team and I agree with you. They should have probably tried to choose a direction this past off season, but I do get that you got 1 year left in Drew Doughty, and it's kind of tough to go to him and say to him potentially in his final year with a team that like, hey, we're gonna blow things up and it's gonna be the start of the rebuild, right? So I can kind of see why you're trying to be competitive and like they didn't really make any dumb decisions, but it is tough because at the end of the day, I just look at this team and I don't think they're good enough to make the playoffs. And I think we're gonna be sitting here next offseason talking about how this team had a pick kind of in the mushy middle there, right? So I'm giving them a C. Mark, what questions do you have for me?
My first one is, do you think that Quentin Byfield, regardless if it's next season or not, let's say by the end of his contract in 3 years, do you still think he can develop into being a number one center in the NHL? Like not their number one center, but maybe we're looking at him as like a top 20 center in the NHL.
I think he can. I'm gonna say he can. I look at him and he has a lot of the features to be that. I feel like just at points over his career, like he hasn't really like he's struggled at points, right? And like partially it's been at points like where he's playing in the lineup and who he's playing with, right? Where now it's like this is kind of his team looking at it on paper, right? So I do think he can become that like a top 20 centerman in the league still. And the other thing too with him is like he is a bigger guy, right? And like we've seen it previously in the NHL. Like some of these bigger guys take a little bit longer to develop, right? So I wonder if it's kind of the same thing with him.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I feel like we've been talking about it for quite some time, but yeah, those bigger
Yeah.
guys sometimes, like even maybe it's more of like a Tage Thompson development path where it's like
Yeah.
sort of your mid 20s, you start becoming really good. Another question about a center, because I feel like it's just like a big deal for them. Do you see them like going out and trading for one? Like, I mean, one guy that's been linked to them for quite some time is like Elias Pettersson. Like Robert Thomas was a bit last year.
Yeah.
Maybe even if it's not a number one center, like could they go out and get another guy that can maybe play in their top six?
I could potentially see them doing that. To be honest, if I was them, like I wouldn't try to make that move this summer, right? Like you saw some younger centermen get traded, right? It's like maybe if you're LA, maybe you're looking at it and you're like, what Mason McTavish went for. Realistically, they just don't want to give that up. But it's like Maverick Bork was available, right? Like I'm sure LA would have been comfortable giving up those assets to go and get Maverick Bork. And if you were to slide Maverick Bork into this lineup, like I'd be looking at this lineup saying it's better than it would be right now, right? So I could see him going out and getting a centerman at some point over next season, but it has to be like the right fit. I don't want them going out and getting a veteran 33, 35-year-old centerman. Like it has to be somebody that fits in with this next core.
Yeah, fair enough. I actually really see them going to make a move regardless for if it's like a second, third line center, a guy that could probably play in their top six and produce. My final question about the Kings is right now, do you think they're going to make the playoffs this next season?
No, I don't think they're making the playoffs. The only way they're making the playoffs is if they finish top three in that Pacific Division. And at the end of the day, it's like I'd take Edmonton over them. I'd take Vegas over them. I'm taking um San Jose over them as well, right? Like there's more teams in that division than I would take over LA. So I don't think
I
they're
might
making
even
the
take
playoffs.
Anaheim over them now, even though how
Yeah.
bad Anaheim's offseason's been if they can get the Gauthier deal done.
Yeah, it's like I don't think LA's making the playoffs. And to be honest, like if they did make the playoffs, I would be kind of surprised. I want to move over to the Central now and talk about the Dallas Stars. This is a team that, man, the drama with this Jason Robertson stuff has been absolutely insane so far this offseason, but that's kind of been settled at least for one more season now. Mark, looking at this prospect pool, how do you feel about it? Can you take me through some of these players?
Yeah, I mean it's not great, but I think like for how much success and how deep some of their playoff runs have been over the past 5 plus years, like that's pretty expected, right?
Yeah,
And like I mean, they did some pretty good drafting in the late 2010s, especially late in the first round and outside of the first round to give them some of the players they have today, like Jason Robertson, Jake Ottinger. They had Logan Stankoven, who's a second round pick at one point, who ended up turning into Mikko Rantanen. The couple guys that I really know some stuff about, I think their best prospect right now is Emil Hemming, who played for Barrie last year in the OHL. Over a point per game, goal scorer, very deceptive, pretty like big guy overall, 6'2", 196. I actually wonder if he could get a shot out of camp this year. He's going to be 20 years old when he starts playing this year. And I wonder if they're going to like give him a shot before he maybe goes to the AHL because I think he could probably provide some depth scoring for them. But even if he's not a full timer this year, I really think he's a guy that you spend 1 year in the AHL and he'd probably be a nice ad for you next season. I talked about Ate Yoki last year. I actually loved that pick in the fifth round last year. He was like one of the better defensive forwards in that draft class, in my opinion. A guy that I actually thought was probably going to go around like the 60 to 70 range in that draft, and he ends up going 146th overall. So like you look at it for Dallas, right? It's like their top six is pretty good. Like their depth is definitely a little bit suspect in my opinion, depending on their
yeah,
health, right? But I think he could come in and maybe be like a really good fourth line center for them in a couple years. So if you get a nice pick like that, especially in the fifth round for a team that doesn't overly have an abundance of draft picks, like I think that would be like a really solid grab, especially if he can become an NHLer in the future. And then the other guy I wanted to talk about a little bit was Cameron Schmidt. He was a third round pick in 2025. He's got a crazy shot. The only problem with him is he's 5 foot
he's
eight,
tiny.
very fast, really high skilled. He's just one of those guys, dude, where it's like he's either going to be undersized and makes it and has an impact, or it's just going to be one of those guys where he had really good production at junior levels and he just couldn't translate his game to the AHL and to the NHL, right? So I believe he's going to be playing in the AHL this year, if I'm not mistaken, or he might be going to NCAA. I think this is a really big year for him in his development because if not, you might get another nice like depth scoring piece for you in the future, but it could also turn out where he was just one of those really good players in junior, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And was good with players his more own age. So I would say like forwards wise, like those are the three guys that I think could probably make the NHL for them in the future. And with goaltending, I don't know. I don't know a lot about all these guys. The guy I'm most familiar with is Poirier. I've watched Man's Goose play a little bit too. He's a big guy. I don't love his game overall though, but Poirier's been really good in the AHL. The thing with them though is like it's kind of like it's Jake Ottinger's crease, and Casey Smith's a solid backup. Even if he's not coming back, it's like they just got to fill a backup hole, right? So
Yeah.
even with them, I'm more just looking at it goalie wise. Like, say they can draft like a potential starting goalie or a 1A, 1B goalie in the next 1 or 2 years. Like, say Jake Onger even leaves, like after his contract's done, that might be enough time for you to draft a guy and develop him that he could be ready for the NHL by the time Jake Ottinger's gone. So I don't love their goalie prospects overall, but I'm not like overly concerned considering they have one of the better goalies in the NHL signed long term.
Yeah, looking at their lineup now, Mark, this is a team that doesn't have a whole lot of changeover. They're bringing back Jamie Benn and Jason Robertson, of course. Jamie Benn signed for like the cheapest deal ever, pretty much. And then Jason Robertson, 1 year, $12 million. They lost out though on like it's kind of as you mentioned earlier, right? Their top six, very good. But when you look at their bottom six, that's where they kind of lost out on some players here this offseason and didn't really do a whole lot to replace it, right? Like they lost out on Maverick Bork, Michael Bunting, he's gone as well. Like those are two guys that are good third line players, right? And you look at what they went out and did, Dallas just didn't really do anything to replace it this offseason. How do you feel about this lineup though heading into the season?
Yeah, I still think they're really good. Like they've got a lot of top end talent, which I mean, you definitely can't not look at because like if they're running especially like a Robertson Johnson Rantanen line, like
Yeah.
but if I told you at the end of November that's the best line in the NHL, like you probably wouldn't be shocked, right? Like there's a lot of top end talent there. Wyatt Johnson's getting better every single year, and I think if he's not a star already, no pun intended, he's going to turn into one at some point. And I mean, like their second line's pretty solid too. I mean, Sam Steele would probably look a little bit better in the bottom six, to be quite honest. I mean, these lines can look different how they place them. We've got Sagan and Ben on the third line right now. With Sagan, it's just more of a little bit less of a role coming off injury, I think. But he's probably
Yeah.
a guy you could plug into the top six. I like the lineup. I don't love the lineup though. I will say, like, I think the depth could maybe be a problem at some point, and they might have to rely on these first two lines to produce. And like you said, like they couldn't really do a lot this whole offseason. They didn't figure out the Jason Robertson thing. Um, and I look at their defense and it's really solid. Like, I mean, they've kind of got the three-headed horse with Lindell, Heiskanen, and Harley still that they're running. And I mean, the depth is okay as well. Like Liam Bichelle, I'm sure is going to take somewhat of a step this year. But I don't know. I think I'm just a little bit less optimistic about them this year because I don't think the lineup is as deep. But I'm still sitting here like I don't think there's a chance that they're missing the playoffs, right?
Oh,
But I
no shot.
wonder about once playoff time comes, depending what moves they make throughout the season. You know what I mean? To potentially bolster their depth or maybe bolster their defense. I just don't know if they're like as much of a contender as they have been the past couple years.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking as well, right? Like when you look at Dallas a couple seasons ago, there's a lot of these similar players that they have right now, but the difference was like Tyler Sagan was still producing a decent amount, right? Like Jamie Benn was still producing a decent amount. Where now that they're older, it's like Tyler Sagan on your third line and Jamie Benn on your third line. It's like how much production are you really going to be getting from those guys? I still like this team a fair bit, but it is just their depth could scare me a little bit at points throughout this season, especially when we get towards playoffs, right? But hey, it's middle of August right now. Playoffs are what, 10 months away, right? Like there can be a lot of changes before that. Mark, looking at this team, who's going to lead them in points next season?
Like I said, that top
So
line,
many
like
guys you could choose.
there are so many guys that could potentially lead this team in points. I'll go with Mikko Rantanen. I think it'll probably be pretty close between these three, but I think I could see Mikko Rantanen getting over 100 points this year, to be quite honest. Kind of second full year in Dallas, you know what I mean? He's probably fully bought in there and comfortable. And I
Yeah.
think that especially if he's playing with elite players, he can put up elite production.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Mikko Rantanen as well. Part of me is kind of wondering if Jason Robertson's going to be there for the full year. It's like, could we maybe see a trade with him, similar to how we saw Miko Rannon get dealt when he got dealt, right? So I think Miko Rannon is going to lead this team in points next season. Mark, this one's a lot of a tougher question because there's not really too many guys here to pick from, but who do you think's going to have a breakout season for them?
The one guy I really like when they signed him out of college and had a decent year last year was Justin Hritskovian. And I think he's going to have a real opportunity to be their third line center this year. And I think that the wingers he's playing with, like you're saying, Sagan and Ben, like, yeah, the production could be somewhat suspect, but I mean, if they both put up 50 points, like I wouldn't be really surprised. And if he'd be in the middle of both of those guys, maybe Sam Steele drops to the third line or it's a Matt Duchene or something like that. I think Justin Hertzgovian's a pretty good player. He's fast, he's skilled. And I think a lot of people don't really know a whole lot about him just because he wasn't this draft pick that kind of came in. He played 3 years in university and then got signed by the Stars. But I wonder if there's another level to his game. Like maybe it's not like a 60 plus point player, but maybe he's a 40 to 50 point player. And I think that'd be a hell of a grab for a guy that wasn't even drafted.
For me, I'm going with Liam Bichel. I just look at the depth with this Stars defenseman, and they don't have a whole lot of depth there, right? And I do wonder if Liam Bichel can be that guy that can kind of have a breakout season because he hasn't played over 50 games in a season before, right? So like he's definitely gonna, unless he gets injured, he's gonna crack that number this year. And I do wonder if he's a guy that could potentially become that like maybe not a top four defenseman this season because their top four defenseman's pretty filled there, but kind of become that next tier down where it's like we're not looking at this team saying that there's a hole there on the third line where we kind of have felt that way for some previous seasons. Mark, looking at their prospect pool, what grade would you give it?
I think it's like a D. Like there's not really a whole lot there. There's one guy that can maybe become a top six forward. More of their players are more depth guys. And honestly, I'm not even really convinced any of these goalies can become NHLers. But
Yeah,
I mean, for them, it's like, yeah, it sucks that it's a D, but it's pretty expected considering that they've traded a lot of picks away at times. And I mean, they're basically just throwing darts at the board for these mid-round picks. I still have faith in their like overall scouting staff, considering how good of a job they've done like over these past 5 or 6 years with plugging these players and getting them in. Like even a guy I just talked about, like Justin Hertzgovian, like that's an undrafted player playing at Northeastern that they've plugged in to become a full-time NHL player with third line production, right? So
yeah.
the prospect pool isn't great right now, but even if they continue to stay competitive, like I'm still optimistic that they could kind of take some swings and it could turn out well for them.
Yeah, for me, I'm gonna give them a D plus. I agree with what you said. Like his prospect pool isn't great, but you also don't need a great prospect pool for where Dallas is at right now. The one thing that look at that I think Dallas did a really good job of was the Cameron Schmidt pick. Like, yeah, he is undersized, and it's what you said. Like with him, I feel like it is going to be like he's a decent, maybe middle six NHLer, kind of like a scoring third liner, or he's not going to be in the NHL whatsoever. But I just look at it. It's like for the 95th port, pardon me, for the 94th pick in the draft to get Cameron Schmidt there. Like I think that's a pretty decent value there with that pick. Last question for you, Mark, is overall offseason, what grade would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, like they couldn't really do a lot because they were tight to the cap with money, but it's like at the same time they also put themselves in this situation. So
Yeah,
I'm gonna give them a D plus, dude. Like I look at this team and they're not a better team whatsoever. Like they're arguably worse. Like you didn't sign Jason Robertson long term. You're gonna have to figure out that situation next offseason. And the thing is, too, it's like, what is that cap number gonna be? Like, what's the overall cap gonna be next season? It's gonna be 112 million. Is Jason Robertson gonna get 16 million dollars next summer? Like, I think they kind of missed an opportunity, potentially sign him for $2 to $3 million less if they had went to that 13, $14 million range. And like I was
yeah.
mentioning with Nashville, I think they may have got the snag of the offseason with Maverick Bork. Like, I don't think that's a great return for Maverick Bork, considering Mackie Samoskevich went for a first and second round pick, and he's not the player Maverick Bork is right now. So I don't love it overall because I don't love their depth, and I don't think that they handle the Robertson situation properly.
Yeah, for me, I'm gonna give them. I think I'm with you. I'm gonna give him a D plus. It's the Jason Robertson thing. Like I think this is gonna be a massive headache for them during the season, where you're gonna have to be worried about this all season long. And the other thing too is apparently there's some players in that locker room that aren't overly happy with how Jason Robertson's handling this, right? So it's like maybe that could even play a factor in the season where it's like the players are kind of on edge and you don't have the season that you're expecting. And then same thing, like moving on from Maverick Bork, like I don't really understand the logic there. There's a couple other guys within this lineup that I probably would have tried to move on from before moving on from Maverick Bork. Mark, what questions do you have for me?
My first one is, do you expect like regression from them in the regular season? Like, is there any chance you could see this team even being like outside of the top three in the division and like maybe being a wild card team?
It's tough to say, but I think at the end of the day they'll still finish top three. I just think they're top six and they're top defensemen. Plus you have Andre. Like I just think like the big guys on this team, they are good enough that they will be able to finish in that top three in the Central. The other thing too is like you look at the Central Division and yeah, there are some teams that have taken some steps, but there also are some teams that are going through some similar kind of situations right now, right? Like the Minnesota Wild, like I wouldn't be surprised maybe if they took a step back as well next season. So think Dallas still is going to finish within that top three in the Central.
Fair enough. Now, I've kind of been banging the drum for a couple of years about like Dallas's defense core. I think they've got three really good defensemen, and there's
Yeah,
definitely a drop off after that. Now, last trade deadline, they went out and got Tyler Myers, a guy they probably thought could probably fill that hole on the second pair right-handed defense side. I don't necessarily think he's the right replacement there, and he's more of a bottom pairing guy at this point. Do you think that they still need a top four right-handed defenseman?
yeah, I kind of think they do, but I also look at it and it's just like, where are they going to find that, right? Especially the money to get one of those guys. Because if you are bringing one in with how close Dallas is to the cap right now, it's like you're probably going to have to move on a meaningful player from your forward group, right? And it's just like, do you really want to do that? And that's where I wonder, right? It's like I get Liam Bichel is a left hand shot, but it's like if he can kind of elevate his game, it's like maybe you try sliding him into the top four and you move Thomas Harley over to the right hand side and you just kind of live with the fact that you don't have a right hand like a top right hand shot D, but you got a couple good left
I
hand
think
shots.
the problem with that is I don't hate that mentality. It's just, do they want their entire top four to be left-handed?
Yeah.
Right. And that's what Buffalo was doing last year. I don't know if that's necessarily the plan. I honestly wonder maybe if it's not for a right hand defenseman. Like, I wonder if Leon Bichelle like, gets moved at some point just because there's no kind of opportunity for him to slide into that top four in the future. Especially because I think they love Essa Lindell, and I think he's actually a hell of a player who's just like strictly
Yeah.
defensive and kind of something they need. But yeah, there isn't a lot of options, and maybe this isn't the right replacement, but like, what if they went out and got like a guy like Zach Whitecloud, dude? Like a guy who's played in the top four in the future. And it's like, maybe you think of him as more of a number five defenseman. I think he's definitely better than Tyler Myers, but I also think like his game could be like elevated if he's playing with a guy like
Yeah.
Thomas Harley, right? And you just kind of let Thomas Harley go. Zach Whitecloud's kind of back there, like shutting plays down. You know what I mean? Like that's more of a guy where the cap hit isn't very high. Maybe you can get some retention there. Like
Yeah.
that could potentially work out.
I think something like that would be a great fit. And it is just tough because like on paper right now, like which is part of why Dallas was so fucked this offseason is like having Tyler Sagan making almost $10 million is kind of tough right now, right? Where it's like I feel like if Tyler Sagan, like if he was in the same boat that Jamie Benn was, where you had to re-sign both Jamie Benn and Tyler Sagan this offseason, I feel like Jason Robertson, his extension would have been for a long term, right? You probably would have kept around Maverick Bork, and you even maybe could have gone out and like got a top four defenseman, right? But I feel like a lot of the issues that Dallas is having this season is just based off the fact that that Tyler Sagan contract still has 1 year left on 1 year left on the books, right?
I think the problem is too, it's like, yeah, they've kicked it down the road a year. That money will come off the books with Sagan, but it's
Yeah,
like Robertson's going to get a raise, regardless what that number is, 16, like, sure, you're going to save a bit of money, but then you're going to have to replace Sagan in like a third line
Yep.
scoring production. The other thing is, too, it's like, what if Leon Bichelle has a breakout year, like you're saying? Like, he's going to be an RFA this offseason. What if he's asking for $5 million next year? Then it's kind of like all the money you had between Robertson and Sagan this year are going to be for Robertson and Bichelle next year, right?
Yep.
So I don't necessarily think kicking the contract down the road a year is that great, as a lot of people were saying at first, because I think, like, Sagan's still a solid player, right? Like, say he's putting up 50 points this year. Like, you're going to have to either re-sign him to a cheaper number or go out and get another 50-point player to replace his production. So I
Yeah.
don't really think it's as great as people were saying.
Yeah, no, I think they should have. I think they should have either signed Robertson long term this season or this offseason, or they should have moved on from him and
Like,
figured out a
remember
trade.
last year I was saying people never thought it was a big deal because they thought he was a good player. Remember, I was like, I don't get why they signed Radek Faksa for $2 million. Like,
Yeah.
like he's a fourth line center. They have so many other candidates that could replace that for league minimum. Imagine they didn't sign Radek Faksa. They could have maybe given Robertson $14 million. Like, they maybe could
Yeah.
have just been like, here's 14 times 8. Boom, we're done. We're not dealing with this. And for other teams, it's like, oh yeah, whatever, fourth line center, 2 million. That team doesn't have this team doesn't have that luxury. They don't have the available cap space. So that was why at the time I was like, I don't understand this signing. He's like a lower tier fourth line center that you're familiar with and you're giving $2 million to, but you don't have a lot of cap space. So I don't know. I didn't love that decision overall, and maybe it did impact Robertson getting a long-term deal. I've got one more question for you. Um, right now, are the Stars still a Stanley Cup contender in your eyes? Like, would you say they're top 8 right now in the whole league for winning a Stanley Cup?
Yeah, I think they still are. I wouldn't say they're like I'd say for some of the past seasons they were probably closer to top five, but I think now maybe they're just outside that top five. But I would say they're still within the top eight of cup contenders. It's like you look at each division, and it's like in the Atlantic, couple teams in there, right? In the Pacific, I'd say it's kind of the Golden Knights. Maybe you can throw the Oilers in there, right? You look at the Central, you got Colorado, you got Dallas. Like, I think Minnesota's maybe taking a bit of a step back. And then you look at the Metro, and in the Metro, it's kind of Carolina. And then based off the offseason, like Washington's kind of there as well, right? So I'd say Dallas is definitely within the top eight, but probably closer to that eight, 8 to 6 range.
Okay.
Staying in the West, but going back over the Pacific, next team is the Edmonton Oilers. This is a team, of course, that back-to-back Stanley Cup finals, and then all of a sudden last season they're losing in the first round. Definitely a big disappointment. Mark, looking at their drafting and their prospects, can you take me through some of these guys?
Yeah, I mean, the Oilers are kind of another team where they've been giving away their picks. They're not really hitting a lot of home runs, I would say, with the picks they've had overall. Looking at some more of their top guys, I mean, Matt Savoy, I wouldn't really consider him a prospect anymore. He's played a lot of time in the NHL at this point.
Yeah,
I'd probably still consider Isaac Howard a prospect. I mean, he only played about 25 games this past season. Didn't really have great production in the NHL, but he had great production in the AHL. A guy who's undersized, skilled, pretty fast overall. I mean, the upside for him is probably a top 6 forward. I think it's just kind of finding a spot on this team and finding a good place for him to kind of exceed that production and become a top 6 forward on this team. So I think he is going to get a real shot in the NHL this year for probably a longer stretch than he did this past year. And I don't really have him penciled in the top 6 right now, but I think that can definitely change depending on what they do with their lines overall. And I mean, they've got a lot of options. Like, Nuge can obviously play center, but he can also be a winger, right? So depending how that plays out, I think Isaac Howard's probably like their best forward prospect right now. I'm really curious about Quinn Hudson, dude. Like,
yeah,
brother to Lane and
that one's
Cole,
interesting.
undrafted, completely different path. He's a forward, undersized as well, but he's very skilled. He's got some speed to his game. rookie season in the AHL, 30 goals, almost a point per game. I don't have him penciled in making the team like right away here, but honestly, if they get an injury or two, or like let's say Trent Frederick continues to struggle, like I wouldn't be surprised if Quinn Hudson got called up and got a real shot. Like maybe he is a guy that spends another 30, 40 games in the AHL and then becomes a full-time NHLer. But when they ended up signing him out of college, I was just like, I didn't really know a whole lot about him that much. Like I didn't watch him a whole lot. But he's a very impressive player, dude. Like he's obviously a lot different than his brothers and not as highly skilled, but he's a very hard worker. And honestly, I think he could become an NHLer at some point here. Um, I would say like player wise, like the one guy too I wonder about, like he's not really a prospect at this point, but Eduard's trail mix. Do you remember him from the Olympics? I think he was on Latvia. He played in
No, not
Grand Rapids
overly.
last year in the AHL. He signed with Edmonton this year. He had 26 goals in the AHL this past year. A lot of people think that he could be penciled in kind of in their bottom six. I think it's more of like, remember last year they had that David Tomasek guy?
Yeah, where you bring him over.
Like you bring a guy over from Europe. I mean, he wasn't in Europe this past year, but he is an older guy that was like really impressive at the Olympics for like not being an NHL player. So he's more the other guy I'm really wondering about. And then in net, I don't necessarily think it's like anything overly impressive. Like Connor Unger or Samuel Janssen could like maybe be backup goalies. I feel like I just really haven't seen a whole enough of them to know the answer to that. And I mean, if they could get a goalie prospect here, I mean, they do have Devon Levi. I don't really know how that's going to turn out necessarily, but it would be nice for them to get a top tier goalie prospect for sure.
Looking at their lineup now going this season, Mark, you mentioned the goalies, and the big part about the offseason for the Oilers was they really did do a full switch up on their goaltenders. They bring in Frederick Anderson. They also go and make a trade for Devon Levi, who was once like a top goalie prospect in the NHL. Outside of that, they didn't do too much, right? Like you lose Adam Henry, Connor Ingram, of course he's gone. You trade Darnell Nurse, about like thankfully that took forever. Jack Roslovic, he's gone as well. What do you think about the moves that they made this offseason?
I actually like their offseason quite a bit in accordance to like trying to shake things up. And you definitely couldn't go back with that goaltending again
Yeah,
this past year, even though I think having Connor Ingram would probably be better than having Tristan Jarry right now, but you sort of are married to that contract. I mean, you made that trade. There's no one that's going to be able to take that contract on at this point or willing to do that. I think overall, like Darnell Nurse definitely needed to go. Like it was time. There was too much outside noise about it. He just really wasn't playing to expectation at all whatsoever. Like I understand that it was going to be hard to live up to that contract, but I feel like at times he even looked like he was struggling to be a top four defenseman, which I think was a huge problem. And I
yeah.
think both sides were probably just willing to go in a different direction at this point. Look, man, Ryan Shea had a really good year at Pittsburgh last year, like 35 points. I'm pretty sure he had 29 points at 5-on-5. I think he's a really solid player. I mean, he's going to get a good opportunity here. I think even $4 million for a guy like that. Like, let's say Ryan Shea isn't a 35 plus point defenseman. His point total dips a bit, even he's a third pairing guy. But $4 million for a third pairing defenseman is going to be where it's at within the next year or two anyway. So I actually really like that move in accordance to like shaking things up. Now, the two guys they got at the deadline last year, Murphy and Dickinson, like, I don't really think those guys were kind of the problem down the stretch. Like, I think the moves at the deadline were not terrible. Like they needed a defensive third line center. Jason Dickinson doesn't put up a lot of points, but he does that. He plays against top quality competition and shuts guys down. Like
Yeah,
he's playing in Chicago on the second line behind Bedard. Like that is his main responsibility, right? Now he's going to have that at a little bit lesser of a role, but imagine Jason Dickinson going out and playing against Nick Suzuki and Nathan McKinnon. Like maybe he's not going to be able to control them the whole game. But then, especially if you're at home, like you're freeing up space for Draisaitl and McDavid to not play against top tier competition. Connor Murphy was unbelievable on the penalty kill last year for Chicago. The one thing about the Hawks, even though they weren't good, they had a really good penalty kill last year. And Jason Dickinson and Connor Murphy were a part of that. I think Connor Murphy is kind of the exact defenseman that the Oilers need. Just a shutdown guy who's not going to take a lot of risks offensively because they already have that. So I like both of those re-signings around $4 million overall. Obviously, they didn't make a whole lot of moves besides that with the goaltending. Like they get Shakir Mukamadulin, which I cannot believe that San Jose sent him the other way to give Edmonton another young defenseman. But I think they're definitely in a better position this year than they were last year. And there is a possibility they could win the division this year.
Yeah, I look at this team and compared to where they were last season, I think they're definitely in a better position. You mentioned their decor. Like I think their decor for the first time in a couple of years on paper, like you can look at and say you don't have too many worries with any players in there, right? Where like there was always something you could look at in this decor over the past couple of years, and you're like, oh, like I don't know, like the depth isn't kind of there, or oh, they're kind of missing somebody there within the top four, right? Where now like it really does look like a complete decor. And then on the forward group, it is going to be interesting to see what kind of steps like Isaac Howard can take, and same with Matt Savoy, right? Because like if those guys can't take steps and really become top six forwards, like it really will change the landscape of this Oilers team a fair bit as well, right? Because already on paper, I think this lineup looks pretty decent. The depth is pretty decent with Dickinson there on your third line, right? But if those two guys in Howard and Savoy and even Doc, right? Like who knows what type of step he could take. But if some of those guys take steps, like it's definitely going to help out this Oilers team going into next season. Mark, I want to ask you who's going to lead this team in points next season?
I think it's going to be Connor McDavid, dude, as long as he stays healthy. I mean, it's probably not shocking to hear this answer, but
I'm shocked right now.
but yeah, I think you never know though, dude, right? Like, because
Yeah.
they're probably going to be playing somewhat of a different system this year and probably be a lot more like detail oriented defensively. Like, maybe he's not necessarily going to lead the league in scoring this year, but I still think he's going to lead the team in scoring.
Yeah, I think it's going to be McDavid as well. Like as you said, unless something happens to McDavid where he's not playing every game, then like it's going to be McDavid, right? Um, Looking at this team, who do you think is going to have a breakout season for them? There's a couple guys you could actually pick here, which is nice.
Even though he really picked it up at the end of last season, I think he's going to continue to keep going, and it's Matt Savoy. I really think he's going to like prove that he's a top six forward, and we could even see like 60 plus points from him last year. Obviously, there was a little bit of growing pains in the first half of the season, but I really felt like he cemented himself to play in the top six, and I think he's going to continue to prove that he should be a top six forward on this team.
I'm going to go with Devin Levi. I think that he's finally getting a real opportunity now here in the NHL. He's paired with Freddie Anderson, right? Like Freddie Anderson, this is a guy over the past couple of years that is notorious for not playing a full season, right? So Devin Levi, he's definitely going to get a shot in the NHL here, and I do think he is going to take it by the reins, and we could be looking at it by the end of next season. And Devin Levi is the number one goalie here for the Oilers, so I'm going to say Devin Levi is going to have a breakout season here for the Oilers. Next question for you, Mark. What grade would you give their prospect pool?
Jesus. D minus. Not optimistic about it whatsoever. Like Isaac Howard for sure at this point is going to be an NHLer. I don't know
Yeah,
if that's top 6 4. Maybe it doesn't turn out that way. And I do think Quinn Hudson will be an NHLer at some point. Maybe more of like a bottom six depth guy. But besides that, man, I don't look at anyone else in their system right now that could really be making much of an impact in the NHL long term. Like I really wondered about Bo Akey being a right-handed D, but he's just not really translated to the pro game that
yep.
well after coming out of the OHL. There's still obviously time. He's 21 years old, but no one is really that intriguing to me on this prospect pool, I will say.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like I don't look at this prospect pool. I'm not like, oh man, there's guys here that could take steps. It's kind of like the guys that can take steps are already in the NHL or going to be in the NHL next season. And like Quinn Hudson, right, like that's the one that's a bit intriguing to me. And even him, it's like he is 24, like he's played a lot in the AHL. He'll probably get a chance in the NHL next year, right? It's like how much of a prospect can you really call him? So I'm gonna say same as you. I'm gonna give him a D minus. Last question for you, Mark, is what grade would you give their overall offseason?
Honestly, I'll go with an A minus. I think it was really good overall. Like not even just like revamping the goaltending. You get away Darnell Nurse, you get out of that contract, and you don't retain anything whatsoever. You get a young defenseman out of it too, who I don't necessarily have penciled in the lineup, but I mean they don't have a lot of young players on this team, right? So even moving
Yep.
forward, I think it's pretty solid. And I love the re-signing of their contracts. Like Dickinson 4 million, Murphy 4.1. Kasperi Kapanen, man, like he was really good for them down the stretch in the playoffs. You sign him for 2.6. Muka Madulin comes in, you give him 1.75. Shea makes $4 million. I think this is the best stretch that Stan Bowman has had as Oilers general manager.
Yeah, I'm gonna give them a B plus. I just look and I love everything that they did. It's just for me, there's a few things that I would have liked to see them maybe try to do that they didn't. And the two big ones is Tristan Jarry and then Trent Frederick. Like to be honest, I think that Trent Frederick deal, you'd probably prefer it if it was off your book. Same thing with the Tristan Jarry one. It's like Trent Frederick, what? He's gonna be playing fourth line, maybe third line at points. I just think Trent Frederick, his role like isn't really there right now with the Oilers, and to be paying him about $4 million to be on the fourth line is a bit tough. And then for Tristan Jarry, it's like don't even well, like I don't what do I even have to say here, right? It's like we all know Tristan Jarry just isn't hasn't been a good NHL goalie for a little bit here. But it's like when you combine those two contracts, that's about $9 million combined that you're towards the cap that you're spending on a fourth line player and a number three goalie, right? So it's like maybe if you could have tried something there to maybe help out a little bit, I would have boosted their grade up a bit. But outside of that, everything else that they did, I really, really did like. Mark, what questions do you have for me here with the Oilers?
My first one is like to start the season at least. Like, do you think they are overall a better team than last season?
Yeah, I would say they are. I think their decor, without a doubt, is better. To be honest, their forward core probably now with Dickinson there on the third line is better. And even their goaltending, there is still a bit of a question mark there, right? Like how healthy can Frederick Anderson stay, and can Devin Levi really be an NHL goalie next season? But I do think on paper they are better than they were heading into last season.
Fair enough. Fair enough. My next question is who do you think is going to be Edmonton's starting goalie in game one of the playoffs next year?
Devin Levi. Based off what I said with the breakout player stuff, I kind of got to stick to my guns here and say that I think Devin Levi is going to be the starting goalie for game one of the playoffs.
Fair
That's
enough.
if they
You
make the
don't even see
playoffs,
like
though.
Freddie, even if like he's healthy.
I could see Freddie if he's healthy. I honestly just think Devin Levi next year really is going to prove that he is a starting caliber NHL goalie.
Fair
Like
enough. I'm expecting a pretty big season from him.
I could see Levi having a similar season maybe to what Bussy did this season, where it's like I feel like some people have kind of forgotten about him and he's going to have a big year.
I'm sure he wouldn't complain about that if that ended up being his season. And my last question about the Oilers is um, what concerns you the most about this team heading into the season? Like they definitely probably got better at every single position, but is there something like you think they will maybe have to address throughout the season?
Yeah, and it's for me, I think it's kind of the depth scoring. Like that is the one question that I really do maybe worry a little bit about right now, right? Like Jason Dickinson, he's a great third line player, but he's not like he's a really good two-way player, right? Like he's not necessarily like a big scoring player. I think some of that could be solved internally though, right? It's like Matt Savoy and Isaac Howard, if those two guys have pretty big seasons here, it's like that kind of helps out with that secondary scoring and depth scoring. But it's like if they don't have great seasons, then you almost have to have too much of the load on McDavid, Draisaitl, Nuge, right? Like those big guys. So I would say their depth scoring is like a little bit of a worry for me.
My biggest concern, honestly, and it's not that they can change it at this point because they married to it, is I'm honestly just worried about Mike Babcock and how this is all going to play out. Like, you never really know, right? There's a lot of history there. Like, it seems like everything's pretty positive and they're all on the same page, but you never know when you're thick into the season. Like, say it doesn't go well for them at the start. Like, how is this going
Yeah,
to
it just
play
turns
out,
into a
right?
shit show.
Yeah, so like I am a little bit worried. I don't think he's necessarily going to do anything stupid, at least at the start. But I mean, there's history there that if it did happen, I wouldn't be surprised.
I definitely would say that's a little bit of a worry as well. I just think part of it though is like with how open these guys on the team have been about like wanting to bring Babcock in and everything. Like it doesn't worry me as much as it would if it was Babcock going to like a lot of these other teams.
Yeah, fair enough.
Any other questions for me with the Oilers or no?
No, that is it.
Moving on to our last team today, then we got the Utah Mammoth. This is a team, Mark, that I'm really starting to love more and more. I watch them. Before we talk about the team on paper going into next season, though, I want to talk about their prospect pool, and this prospect pool is pretty decent. Can you take me through some of these players?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Utah's done a really good job at kind of revamping their prospect core after, I mean, like Arizona was a shit show for a while, not making the playoffs all the time. They've had some pretty high picks over the years, uh, regardless if it was with Utah or Arizona overall. So first guy we'll talk about, T. Ginla, very skilled player, Jerome McGinley's son. Definitely a guy that I anticipate being a top six forward in the future. Might even get a shot in the NHL this year. I'm not really 100% sure if he would make the team out of camp because I think they definitely made some moves this offseason to kind of bolster their depth a little bit. But he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on. Caleb Denoyer was the fourth overall pick in 2025. Probably a guy that is going to be their second line center at some point here in the future. He's a really skilled player as well. I think he's like a probably going to be like a 60 plus point player. I don't think he's going to like kind of blow you away point total wise, but he's very like detail oriented in his game. And I think a guy that could definitely be in the top six down the road. Um, Gabe Smith, they took in 2024 in the fourth round. He's a big guy, dude. He uses his physicality a lot. He was actually the QMJHL playoff MVP last year. Meanwhile, Moncton lost in the finals. So he's a player I'm keeping my eye on as definitely like more of like a bottom six type player. They took Ethan Belches 17th overall this year. Now, I know me and you don't love him overall, but if you
That's
told me
seven.
that he was going to go
No,
17th overall, I don't
yeah,
hate that pick. I
yeah,
really don't at all. Because the one thing, too, with Utah is they don't necessarily like they've drafted some guys that have size that haven't made NHL impact yet, but they didn't have a whole lot of size on their team, I would say, like last year. They probably addressed it a little bit with like Anders Lee this offseason, even like bringing in Uyghur. I know he's not a huge guy, but he can be physical as well. So I like the Belches pick. He can probably be like a top six scoring forward. I was just more worried about like a team taking a swing on him at like 6 or 7
yeah.
overall. I didn't love that, but at 17, I think this is actually a good fit too. Like I really like him in Utah and the opportunity that lies ahead. And the two Russians are the next guys I'm going to talk about, Daniil Boot and Dmitry Simashev. Daniil Boot is a 6'6" forward. Looks like he's going to be a power forward in the NHL. Played about 25 games in the NHL last year, but kind of really excelled in the AHL, at least production wise. I really see him making the team out of the camp and making a big impact this year. Dmitry Simashev was taken sixth overall in 2023. Very smooth skating defenseman, has put up points at the AHL level. I think he's going to be like kind of like a secondary point scoring defenseman in the NHL, probably 30, 40 points overall. Didn't really get a great shot in the NHL last year, but I think he's going to have a pretty good shot this year. Before I move on to the goalies, one guy I kind of wanted to ask you about because I feel like his ceiling was high and now he's a little bit blocked. What do you think about like Maverick Lamoureux at this point? Like 6'7" right-handed defenseman. A couple years ago, he had a little bit of a shot in the NHL that didn't necessarily go
Yeah.
great. And I was wondering if he could potentially make the NHL this year. They went out and signed Andrew Peeke a couple days into free agency. And I think that's really blocking his spot. But do you think he can still become like a top four defenseman, or do you think time is kind of dwindling there?
I think top four defenseman's kind of tough, especially top four defenseman on this team, right? Because you look at the defenseman ahead of them. It's you got Mackenzie Weegar there on your first pairing, and then you got John Marino on your second pairing. And John Marino just signed an 8-year deal or an 8-year extension as well, right? So it's like the route to being a top four defenseman here on Utah is definitely tough. Like I don't think Maverick Lamoureux, you're gonna look at him and be like, yeah, this guy's like non-NHL defenseman, but I just don't think the path for him to being a top four defenseman is necessarily still there. And he is interesting though, because he is like 6'7", right? Like he's a monster, and I could see him. I do think he'll be getting minutes next season with Utah. I just don't think he'll be getting that opportunity.
Yeah, I could see that. Maybe he'll get a better shot like the year after this year. Like Peak only
Yeah,
signed that 1 year deal, but I was wondering if this was the year they'd really give him a shot. But his offensive production wasn't great in the AHL. I know he is somewhat of a two-way guy, but I was really curious if he was going to kind of get a decent shot this year. Now, they got two pretty good goalie prospects. One of them they just traded for this offseason, and Sebastian Cossa. I actually really like that move, even though they gave up like a first round pick for him. I think it was 23rd overall. Karel Vejmelka played the most games in the NHL last season. He's a solid starting goalie, but I
he
really
is.
felt like he was somewhat fatigued, especially once the playoffs came around. And I think they definitely need a guy that could play about 30 games, and Vitek Vanacek was not that guy last year at all. Cossa had really good AHL numbers, 15th overall pick back in 2021. Definitely highly touted. I don't know if he's going to be a starting goalie in the future. I think it's definitely possible. He's got the potential, but I think it was a really nice grab to at least kind of pair him up with a guy who's got some good experience, and maybe there'll be a points in the season where he kind of takes the load and runs with it. And their other good goalie prospect is Michael Rabel, plays at UMass, was World Junior star for Czechia a couple of years ago. There was kind of rumors about him signing last offseason, and he didn't do that. And it kind of rubbed, I was going to say the Coyotes, the Mammoth, the wrong way. And there was rumors about him even getting traded. He obviously has not been traded yet. I don't really know if there's much of a path for him over these next couple of years, with Vejmelka signed for 4 years and Cossa just getting traded there and re-signing. So maybe there is a path, like once Vejmelka's contract's done or near the end of his contract,
Yeah.
but I think he's going to end up being traded at some point, but he's still a guy that's a pretty good goalie prospect.
I want to switch over now and look at their lineup going to next season, because this lineup, like we just mentioned, all these prospects, and a lot of these prospects we don't actually have projected to be on this lineup, right? Like the two, Daniil Boot and Dmitry Simichev, we both have them making this team outside of camp. Same thing with Sebastian Cossa, but a lot of these other guys we don't have making the team. They also were pretty active this offseason, right? Like you go and you sign Andres Lee to a 3-year deal, 5.4 million. I think that's a decent deal, right? Like it's you're not married to the guy where you're signing him for long term, and it's a good deal where it's like you can let these young guys continue to develop before you have to kind of force them into the NHL and rush their development. For me, the big one though that I love is going out and getting Vincent Trocheck, right? Like you have a 1-2 centerman punch now of Logan Cooley and Vincent Trocheck. I look at this on paper, and compared to where they were last season with their centerman depth, like they are they are steps ahead right now, right? Plus, you still got these guys in the pipeline as well, right? Like Dan Hoyer, eventually he's going to be ready at some point. Mark, what do you look at for this offseason with them and kind of like and dislike?
Yeah, I think they had a decent amount of change because they also got rid of JJ Peterka, a guy they gave
Yeah,
up a decent amount for that only spent one season there. Didn't really have the greatest season overall. I am a bit surprised they gave up on him that quickly. But I feel like they felt like they were going to get Anders Lee. Their depth is definitely a little bit better, I think, than last year too. Because that was my one knock on them last year. I was like, I like their top six, but I don't really know where their depth scoring is going to come from. Like Brandon Tanev, like they signed him, he didn't even get a goal all of last season, which is pretty surprising overall. But I like it. I look at them. I think they're more deep. I think they're going to be harder to play against, especially physically, regardless if Anders Lee's in the top six or not. Like Trocheck's a guy that can take a lot of the load off of Logan Cooley
yeah,
and definitely get some of those harder matchups. He's obviously one of the best face-off guys in the NHL overall. They also have Nick Schmaltz too. Like he's a guy that can play center at times too, right? But he's also a really versatile guy that can play the wing. I like that trade with the Rangers. I felt like Dursey wasn't probably going to get a great opportunity there, just considering like Sergachev is their number one power play guy. Like Simashev is a guy that I think could probably run the second power play at points too. And after they
Weegar
got
as
Uyghur,
well.
it's like that right side is very log jammed, especially
Yeah,
because they like John Marino a lot. He's much of a different player than Durzi. Like he's more defensively responsible, penalty kill guy. But I think he is a top four defenseman. I actually love that contract they gave him because I think $7 million for a top four defenseman is good. We're going to be looking at that in like a year from now, right? And his contract's not even starting for a year. So I'm more optimistic about this team heading into this season 100% than I was last season. There's obviously still some improvements that could be made, but there's also probably going to be opportunities for young guys to play depth
Yeah.
roles as well, like Daniil Boot. Got him penciled in the bottom six right now. Dmitry Simashev is probably going to get an opportunity to be a full-time NHLer. And then you never know about with a guy like TJ Ginla. And honestly, I think Caleb Desnoyers is going to be one of those 19-year-olds that's going to go to the AHL. So he could be a guy that gets called up and gets an opportunity at points as well. So I like the position they're in overall. And I think, too, it's like, if the season isn't going well and they need to make a move, like say the Anders Lee doesn't turn out well, right? Like say he's really not a top six forward, like they've got picks, they've got prospects to
Yeah.
make a move, to do something, right? So I think they're in a really good position.
Yeah, and even as you said, right, it's like maybe one of those prospects works out because the interesting thing with this prospect pool compared to a lot of other prospect pools around the NHL is a lot of the guys that are close to being ready here for the Mammoth, they're not going to the NCAA, right? So it's like if you like if you're 3 weeks in the season and TJ Ginla's playing the AHL and he has 30 points in 15 games, meanwhile Andres Lee like snapped his ankle in half, but you know what I mean? It's like you can just go call up TJ Ginla, where it's like a lot of these other teams now that their top prospects are going NCAA. It's like, well, you got to wait till the end of the NCAA season, right? So the Mammoth are in kind of a unique position here where I feel they got a pretty decent lineup on paper, but also some of these prospects that are pretty close to the NHL that could potentially even get NHL looks this season. Like they're all going to be in the AHL where you can call these guys up, right? I want to ask you, Mark, before we move on to the questions, the one question I have for you that's kind of unique to this team is out of the prospects that they have, being like Daniil Boot, Dmitry Simachev, TJ Ginla, Daniel Hoyer, like who do you think the most likely one is to make the roster out of camp?
I think it's Simashev, dude. I think that there's a real opportunity there for him to be on the left side, like a full time next season, especially with them losing Ian Cole. Like Nate Schmidt's a guy that I like. I feel like he could play in the top four, but like I would almost love him more on the bottom pair. Like I
Yeah,
know you're probably going to ask me even about a breakout player for them. Like I really look at Dmitry Simashev having a big year this year. I really do. Like I think there's going to be a point this season where he's bumping Nate Schmidt down to the bottom pair, and
yeah,
he's going to be a top four defenseman for this team. He is a great skater. He's really good defensively.
it's pretty
I
big
really
too.
think that he has a like I don't want to say like the sky is the limit for him because I don't think like he's going to be like a point producing defenseman in the NHL. Like I look at Dmitry Simashev and I see a lot of like maybe like a Jonas Brodin. Like I
Yeah,
really do. Like I think he's going to have a long career, great skater, great defensively, and I think that's something what Utah needs.
yeah, and to be honest, that was gonna be my pick for breakout player for this team as well. I want to move on to the batch of questions though, Mark. Who's gonna lead this team in points next season?
Yeah, it's tough because like that first line of Gunther, Cooley, Keller,
That could,
really, really good, right?
yeah,
Schmaltz even had a big year this year. I don't really know if his high end point totals necessarily as much as those guys, but I think I'm gonna go with Logan Cooley, dude. I think there's gonna be a point here where he is over a point per game player. Obviously, the injury held him back a little bit this year, but I really think that Logan Cooley could be putting up 80 to 90 points within the next year or two here.
yeah, I'm with you. I'm going Logan Cooley as well. To be honest, I thought he was gonna have that season last season, but unfortunately, he got injured at a pretty
I think it
bad
was more
time.
Gunther last year, right? Hitting that 40
Yeah,
goal mark. Like he really solidified himself as a 40 goal scorer.
but yeah, I think it's gonna be Logan Cooley. Like I think he'll have that big season this season. We're gonna skip past the breakout player mark because you already kind of said who that was gonna be. Um, Looking at this prospect pool, what grade would you give it?
Yeah, even though some of these guys have like sort of graduated recently or like at least played some NHL games, like it's still a really solid prospect
Yeah,
pool.
it
Like
is.
there's at least three guys here that I think are for sure going to be top six forwards. And then you got a defenseman in Simashev who I think could be as well. And then you got two good goalie prospects, and I think at minimum one of them is going to be a starting goalie. I think I'm going to go with an A minus, man. Like I'm still very optimistic about this prospect
Yeah.
pool and them plugging holes here. Like I even mentioned Gabe Smith. Like could he be a nice physical bottom six forward for you? Maverick Lamoureux. Like we're talking about him maybe being a top four defenseman. Maybe at worst he's a bottom pairing guy who's like somewhat of like a Tyler Myers type, right? So I still really like this prospect pool overall.
For me, I'm gonna give this prospect pool an A. I look at this prospect pool and like you got guys in here who I think could be real meaningful NHL players. Then you also have a decent amount of guys in here who I think could have like be playing NHL minutes, right? Like one guy that you didn't mention earlier, like Adam Valentini, getting him in the third round this year, like that's honestly pretty intriguing of a pick at 96th overall, right? So I look at this prospect pool and to be honest, like off the top of my head, the one I would compare him to is San Jose, right? Like I think San Jose maybe has a bit more of that top end talent in their prospect pool compared to Utah, but like I wouldn't say the prospect pools like are drastically far apart in overall talent. I think Utah has a really good prospect pool. Last question for you, Mark, is looking at their offseason, what grade would you give them?
Fuck, I really like their offseason. Like, even though they got rid of Paterka and like maybe
Yeah,
makes their top six a little bit less threatening before the Trocheck trade, like they got two first round picks for him after coming off a pretty poor season. Marino's contract's good. They help their goaltending. Defense might be a slightly worse, but I think it's probably better for the long run.
the Costa trade I love.
I'm gonna go A.
Yeah.
I think they had one of the better off seasons in the NHL overall. Like I was very concerned about their depth scoring last year, and I feel like it was warranted. But I'm not very concerned about their depth scoring at all this year. Like Barrett Hayton gets knocked down to the third line. Lawson Krause is potentially down on the third line. I think Jack McBain has still got other levels to his game. He's a physical center who could probably be a nice shutdown third line guy. Like Daniil Boot is going to get a real opportunity. Simashev. I really like their offseason.
Yeah, I'm giving them an A as well. To the one thing like that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense from their offseason was the Barrett Hayton kind of how they handled that offer sheet. But outside of that, everything else with their offseason, I absolutely love. Right? Like this is a team that is going to be definitely better going into this season than they were last season. And you didn't move on from any of your young players or prospects. A lot of the business that they did and a lot of these contract extensions were pretty safe, right? Like I really do like what they did here this offseason. Mark, what questions do you have for me?
So we kind of like brushed over it a little bit with with Dallas, but do you think Utah could like beat out one of these big dogs to finish top three in the Central?
Yeah, I do. I think,
I really do
yeah,
too.
to be honest, I think without predicting the order, I think the top three is going to be Colorado, Dallas, and Utah in some like in some order. I think I just think Minnesota has taken a little bit of a step back and more of a step back than Dallas did, and I think Utah has jumped up enough that they can maybe take over the Wild for that third spot there in the top three.
My next question is, do you think Utah's current core is going to be good enough to win a Stanley Cup, let's say in the next 5 years? Or do you think there's something that they're still like really lacking that you would like to see them go out and like make a move for before you'd be convinced?
And when you say current core, like are you including the guys that haven't yet got to the NHL?
Yeah, like I mean, like I wouldn't say like it's part of their core now, but it's definitely part of their core for the
Yeah.
future.
I think I think they could. Like to be honest, like just let's look at this what this team could look like in 3 seasons. In 3 seasons, you could have Logan Cooley, Clayton Keller, and Dylan Gunther on your first line, right? Like that's not going to change. Your second line potentially you could have Daniil Boot on one wing, TJ Ginla on the other wing, and Caleb Daniel up the center of the ice. you're it is in 3 years, but like I think Vincent Trocheck in 3 years will still be a great third line centerman. Your third line potentially could be Vincent Trocheck, like maybe Lawson Krause is still around. If not, it's like Ethan Belches is there. Maybe that Gabe Smith kid is there, right? It's like, and then you look at your decor. It's like their decor already is pretty good. Plus, Simashev's going to get better. Maybe Maverick Lamoureux become something. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe you go out and you trade for a defenseman, right? And then your goaltending, it's like Vijmelka and Kosa, I think is a pretty decent tandem. Plus you got Herbal, who knows, right? Like it's in 3 to 5 years, it's like what could he progress to? I think this is a team that definitely could win a Stanley Cup with this
I,
core.
I do agree with you. The only thing I would say that might be a concern down the road would be the right side of their defense. I think it's just
Yeah,
gonna it's just about like how does Uyghur fall off? And it's like, how big
yeah,
is
that's fair.
that? And it's just like, maybe they will need like a top handed, right handed shooting guy. But honestly, maybe there's even a situation where Simichev is better than I think he will be, and he becomes a top pairing guy, and Sergachev becomes the guy on the right side, right? So I don't think it's like that much of a concern, really. But I would say, if anything, maybe if I'm looking 4 to 5 years down the road, that might be the only thing I'm
Yeah.
really worried about. But the forward depth is fine. I think the defense, like the bottom two pairings, are going to be totally fine. It would just be kind of that right side, if anything.
Yeah, and like with how many picks they still have and with their prospect pool and how good it is, it's like having that is the one thing where you like look at and you're like maybe it's not good enough to win a Stanley Cup. It's like, man, like you can go and trade for that with what Utah have, right? So I'm with you. I'm not overly worried about that.
My final question of the day for you is, this season, I mean, we both think that Utah will be a playoff team without a doubt, like maybe even top three in the division.
Yeah.
Right now, gun to your head, do you think they're going to win a round in the playoffs this year?
Yeah, I'm gonna say they do. Um,
Even if it's Dallas or Colorado
fuck.
they're playing?
It's actually tough. Yeah, because I wasn't considering. I was more considering that they'd be playing on whoever was in a wild card.
See, I think that would almost be better for them. Like, I think
Yeah,
they're
no,
more equipped to play like a Vegas or an Edmonton in the first
yeah,
round.
it almost would be better than for finishing a wild card.
That's why I asked you this
It's
question. It's a
tough.
tough one, dude.
I'm gonna say they're gonna win a play. Yeah, I'm still gonna say that they're gonna win a playoff series. I believe in these guys, man. Utah might be one of like my favorite teams to watch right now, like outside of the Flames, of course. But Utah, they're just so fun, dude. It's like the new
Yeah, they're
toy.
fun. They're good. They're good defensively, even for a team that's like
Yeah,
up and coming. Like, I think Tourney's actually. Remember we were saying maybe on the hot seat last year. I think he actually like rebounded into. Well, they struggled for a bit. They
yeah,
came
they
out.
did.
They came out hot, and there was like a 2 month stretch where they were like a 500 team,
Which is
right?
right when
So
Cooley went down too, right?
yeah, but I mean, like they've got better center depth this year as
Yeah.
well. Even if something like that does happen, but I'm gonna say they will not win a round just because of who they could play. But think that even if they don't, they shouldn't really change much, because I think that
Oh yeah.
they have another year here where a lot of guys could develop, and maybe the year after this year is kind of their chance.
Yeah, I wouldn't change things with this team until it's like you have your Dane Hoyer and TJ Gimla and like some of these prospects that like you've been building around based off like your drafting. Like I won't change anything until like those guys have been in the league for a couple of years, and then you're not still not winning playoff series, right? But it's like you look at Dallas, Minnesota, and Colorado. It's like those teams potentially in 3 to 5 years could have their windows closing, where it's like Utah's is still gonna be wide open at that point, right? Overall, though, that's going to wrap up today's episode. We're going to be back next week. Next week, we're going to continue on with playoff teams, so stay tuned for that. But for everybody listening in right now, thanks for tuning in.